Right now, somewhere 22,236 miles above the surface of the Earth, a satellite the size of a school bus is slowly climbing toward its permanent home in the sky. And when it gets there, it is going to change the way billions of people across the Asia-Pacific region connect to the internet forever. This is not just another rocket launch. This is the final piece of a global puzzle that took over a decade to build, cost billions of dollars to assemble, and survived disasters, delays, and some of the most dramatic setbacks in satellite history. And it all came together on the back of the most powerful operational rocket in the world, SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, roaring back to life after an 18-month silence, carrying a mission that the entire satellite industry was watching. Welcome to the story of Viasat-3 F3, the last satellite in Viasat's next-generation global broadband constellation, and the spectacular high-stakes launch that sent it skyward from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Let's start with the rocket itself, because if you're not already in awe of the Falcon Heavy, you need to be. This is not an ordinary launch vehicle. The Falcon Heavy is an engineering marvel that pushes the very limits of what a reusable rocket can do. It is built from 3 modified Falcon 9 first stages strapped together, creating a triple-core beast that stands 70 meters tall and weighs over 1.4 million kilograms, fully fueled. When all 27 of its Merlin 1D engines ignite simultaneously at liftoff, they generate more than 5.1 million pounds of thrust, the equivalent of approximately 18 Boeing 747 aircraft running at full power at the exact same moment. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of energy being unleashed in a single second. To put that in context for you, the Falcon Heavy is currently the second most powerful operational rocket on Earth, trailing only NASA's Space Launch System moon rocket, which generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust. But here is what makes Falcon Heavy extraordinary beyond just raw power. It is partially reusable, it launches commercially, and it costs a fraction of what comparable vehicles charged. SpaceX lists Falcon Heavy at approximately $97 million per launch in its standard reusable configuration. Compare that to the now retired Delta IV Heavy, which cost between $350 and $400 million per launch, or NASA's SLS, which cost over $2 billion per flight. The Falcon Heavy has made access to the most demanding orbital regimes: high-energy geostationary transfer orbits, deep space trajectories, missions to the Moon and Mars, economically viable in a way that was simply not possible before. The Falcon Heavy first flew on February 6, 2018, in one of the most extraordinary and theatrical debut flights in the history of spaceflight. SpaceX loaded a cherry-red Tesla Roadster belonging to Elon Musk onto the rocket as a dummy payload, placed a mannequin called Starman in the driver's seat, wearing a full spacesuit, and launched it into a heliocentric orbit that crosses the path of Mars. It was absurd and brilliant in equal measure. The side boosters landed simultaneously at Cape Canaveral in one of the most visually stunning moments anyone in the space industry had ever seen. 2 pillars of fire descending in perfect synchrony to touch down side by side. That image went around the world in minutes, and it announced to everyone watching that the era of reusable heavy-lift rockets had truly arrived. Since that debut, Falcon Heavy has racked up an unblemished record. It has launched government satellites, classified military payloads, deep space science missions, and commercial communication satellites. It sent NASA's Psyche mission to study a metal asteroid. It launched the Europa Clipper, one of the most ambitious planetary science missions ever conceived, on its journey to study the ocean beneath Jupiter's moon Europa in October 2024. And it has now, with the Viasat-3 F3 mission, completed its 12th flight overall, maintaining a perfect 100% mission success rate across every one of those launches. But the Viasat-3 F3 mission also marked a significant hiatus coming to an end. The last time Falcon Heavy flew before this was in October 2024, the Europa Clipper mission. That means this rocket had sat idle for 18 months before roaring back to life for the Viasat mission. 18 months is a long time in the rocket business, and the fact that SpaceX could stand the vehicle back up, re-qualify it, and send it flying again with a perfect outcome is a testament to the maturity of the Falcon Heavy system and the operational excellence of SpaceX's launch teams. The launch was originally scheduled for April 27, 2026, during an 85-minute window that opened at 10:21 in the morning Eastern Time. SpaceX had the rocket, Falcon Heavy, lying horizontal at Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, fully prepped and ready. But the Florida weather, which has derailed more than a few space missions over the decades, had other plans. SpaceX announced on social media that the launch was being scrubbed due to unfavorable weather conditions. The vehicle and payload were confirmed healthy. The mission was rescheduled, and when the rocket finally lifted off, it did so with thundering precision, sending the 6.6 metric ton Viasat-3 F3 satellite on its way to geostationary orbit 22,236 miles above Earth. The booster configuration for this mission was particularly noteworthy. The two side boosters, designated B-1072 on its second flight and B-1075 on its record-setting 22nd flight, both returned to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station after separation. But this mission made history in a very specific way. It was the first time SpaceX simultaneously used both Landing Zone 2 and Landing Zone 40 for booster recovery in a Falcon Heavy mission. Watching those two side boosters come back to Earth in tandem, engines blazing, is one of the most jaw-dropping sights in modern aerospace. And this launch delivered exactly that spectacle. The core booster, as is standard for high-energy missions like this one where maximum performance is needed, was expended rather than recovered. Now let's talk about the payload, because the satellite sitting atop that rocket is just as remarkable as the rocket itself. The Viasat-3 F3 is the third and final satellite in Viasat's next-generation global broadband constellation, a program that took more than a decade to conceive, design, build, and deploy. And understanding what this satellite is and what it is supposed to do requires understanding the bigger story of Viasat and the extraordinary journey this constellation has taken to reach completion. Viasat is a global communications company headquartered in Carlsbad, California, with offices in 24 countries around the world. The company's mission is built around a simple but ambitious belief that everyone and everything on Earth can and should be connected. Viasat has been operating high-throughput geostationary satellites for years, providing broadband internet to homes, businesses, airlines, ships, and military users. But the Viasat-3 program represented a generational leap, a new class of satellites designed to deliver terabit-level throughput with unprecedented flexibility, completely redefining what satellite broadband could offer. The Viasat-3 constellation is built around 3 satellites, each one designed to provide coverage to a major global region. The first, Viasat-3 F1, covers the Americas. The second, Viasat-3 F2, covers Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And the third, the one that just launched, Viasat-3 F3, covers the Asia-Pacific region. Together, these 3 satellites were designed to give Viasat a truly global high-capacity network capable of delivering more than 1 terabit per second of throughput in each region. To put that in perspective, 1 terabit per second is roughly 1,000 gigabits per second. That is an extraordinary amount of bandwidth delivered from a single satellite platform sitting 22,000 miles above the Earth. But the story of getting to this point has not been smooth, not even close. The Viasat-3 program has survived delays, disasters, and near catastrophes that would have ended lesser programs entirely. The original plan called for the first satellite to launch in 2021 on an Ariane 6 rocket. But delays in the Ariane 6 development program, which faced its own series of technical and scheduling challenges, pushed that timeline back significantly. Then, geopolitics intervened. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, multiple satellite payloads that had been contracted for Russian Soyuz rockets had to be rapidly remanifested onto other vehicles, creating enormous pressure on alternative launch providers. Viasat ultimately switched Viasat-3 F3's launch vehicle from the Ariane 64 to SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, a decision that, as we'll see, turned out to have significant performance advantages as well. The first satellite, Viasat-3 F1, finally launched on May 1, 2023, aboard a Falcon Heavy rocket. And then came one of the most devastating moments in recent commercial satellite history. After the satellite successfully reached near geostationary orbit, something went wrong with the deployment of its antenna reflector. The deployment did not occur nominally. The satellite's performance was severely and permanently compromised. Instead of delivering 1 terabit per second of capacity over the Americas, it was operating at less than 10% of its designed throughput. Viasat filed a $421 million insurance claim, described at the time by one underwriter as a market-changing event for the satellite insurance industry. The company's stock suffered its biggest single-day loss following the news. It was a brutal blow. Viasat-3 F2 launched later on an Atlas V rocket in November 2025, completing regional coverage for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And now, with the launch of Viasat-3 F3, Viasat finally has all 3 of its next-generation satellites in orbit, a decade-long program completed, despite every obstacle thrown in its path. The Viasat-3 F3 satellite itself is a technological achievement of the highest order. It was built by Boeing on the advanced 702P Plus satellite bus, a platform known for its high power, high reliability, and long operational life. The satellite features a fully digital payload architecture with dynamic beamforming and flexible bandwidth allocation. In plain terms, that means the satellite can intelligently direct its capacity to wherever demand is highest at any given moment. Unlike older satellite designs where coverage beams were fixed in position and spectrum allocations were rigid, Viasat-3 F3 can dynamically shift its resources, flooding bandwidth into regions experiencing high traffic, whether that is over the Pacific Ocean during peak airline travel hours, across Southeast Asia's growing tech corridors, or over the Indian Ocean, where maritime shipping routes carry enormous commercial traffic. The satellite weighs approximately 6.6 metric tons at launch, one of the heaviest commercial communications satellites ever built. It is this extreme mass that makes Falcon Heavy not just preferable, but essentially mandatory for this mission. No other commercially available rocket could deliver a payload of this size and weight to a high-energy geostationary transfer orbit in a way that made economic sense. The Falcon Heavy can lift up to 26,700 kilograms to geostationary transfer orbit, far more than any Falcon 9 configuration could manage, and at a cost that commercial operators can actually afford. There is another critical advantage to using Falcon Heavy for this mission, and Viasat's Vice President of Satellite Systems, Dave Abrahamian, was very clear about it in the pre-launch coverage. Falcon Heavy is a more powerful vehicle than the Atlas V, which carried the F2 satellite. That extra power allows SpaceX to inject the satellite into a more favorable transfer orbit, one where the apogee, or highest point of the orbit, is already close to geostationary altitude, and the inclination is reduced to just about 3 degrees. That matters enormously for satellite operators because it dramatically reduces the amount of work the satellite's own onboard electric propulsion system has to do to climb to its final operating position. Less propellant spent on orbit raising means more propellant available for station keeping during the satellite's operational life, extending its useful service life and improving the economics of the entire mission. Abrahamian estimated that the ideal commissioning time for F3 would be meaningfully shorter than for F2, precisely because of this more favorable insertion orbit. Following separation from Falcon Heavy's upper stage, which occurs approximately 5 hours after liftoff, Viasat-3 F3 will spend several months using its electric propulsion system to gradually raise its orbit and reduce its inclination until it arrives at its designated slot at approximately 158.55 degrees east longitude along the geostationary belt. From that position, the satellite will have a sweeping view of the Asia-Pacific region, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and large stretches of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Once it reaches that slot and completes the journey, it will undergo rigorous in-orbit testing of both its bus systems and its communications payload. Viasat expects the satellite to enter full commercial service by late summer 2026. The strategic importance of this satellite for Viasat cannot be overstated. The Asia-Pacific region is one of the fastest growing markets for satellite communications in the world. Airlines operating trans-Pacific routes are under enormous pressure from their passengers to deliver reliable, high-speed in-flight Wi-Fi. Maritime operators in some of the world's busiest shipping lanes, from the South China Sea to the waters around Australia, need dependable connectivity for navigation, operations, and crew welfare. Military and government users across the region require secure, high-bandwidth communications that cannot be easily disrupted. And hundreds of millions of people in rural and remote communities across Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and parts of South Asia still lack access to affordable, high-speed internet. Viasat-3 F3 is designed to address all of these needs simultaneously. Viasat's CEO Mark Dankberg described the completion of the Viasat-3 constellation as a cornerstone moment for the company. He said that with F3 in service, the completed constellation would become the foundation of a unified, global high-capacity network, one that would position Viasat to compete in an increasingly demanding and competitive satellite communications market. And competition is exactly the right word, because Viasat is operating in a landscape that has been radically transformed by the rise of low Earth orbit broadband constellations. SpaceX's Starlink has deployed thousands of satellites and serves millions of customers globally. Amazon's Project Kuiper is rapidly building out its own LEO network. OneWeb continues to expand its coverage. The satellite broadband market is more dynamic, more competitive, and more consequential than it has ever been in its history. What Viasat brings to this competitive environment is something LEO constellations struggle to match at scale: the raw capacity of a terabit-class geostationary satellite, combined with the ability to direct that capacity flexibly across a wide geographic area. A single Viasat-3 satellite parked at geostationary altitude can cover an entire hemisphere. It does not require hundreds or thousands of individual spacecraft to be coordinated and maintained. For enterprise customers, government operators, and aviation and maritime users who need highly reliable, high-throughput connectivity over specific regions, the GEO model still has powerful advantages, and Viasat-3 F3 represents the current peak of what that model can deliver. There is also a broader space industry context to this launch that deserves attention. This was Falcon Heavy's first flight in 18 months, and its 12th overall. The fact that SpaceX can bring back a rocket that has been in storage for a year and a half and execute a flawless mission carrying one of the heaviest and most expensive commercial payloads ever launched says something profound about where the space launch industry is in 2026. We are living in an era where rocket reusability is not a novelty or a marketing claim. It is an operational reality that is fundamentally reshaping the economics of getting to orbit. The side booster landings on this mission also marked a historic first: the simultaneous use of Landing Zone 2 and Landing Zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in a Falcon Heavy recovery. SpaceX had previously used these landing zones separately, but coordinating both to catch two boosters from the same mission at the same time required extraordinary precision in the timing and targeting of each booster's return burns. The fact that they pulled it off cleanly is a reminder that SpaceX's landing and recovery capabilities have now reached a level of routine excellence that would have seemed like science fiction just 15 years ago. And this launch also signals what is coming next for Falcon Heavy. SpaceX has assembled a deep and impressive pipeline of future missions for the vehicle. NASA awarded SpaceX a $175.7 million contract in April 2026 to launch the European Space Agency's Rosalind Franklin Mars rover, a sophisticated scientific instrument designed to drill into the Martian surface and search for signs of ancient life. That mission is scheduled for no earlier than late 2028 and will mark a historic milestone. SpaceX's first ever contract to send a payload to the surface of another planet. NASA's Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, a flagship observatory designed to study dark energy and search for exoplanets, is also on Falcon Heavy's upcoming manifest. NASA's Dragonfly mission, which will send a rotorcraft to fly through the atmosphere of Saturn's moon Titan, is another future Falcon Heavy payload. The rocket that carried Viasat-3 F3 to the sky is not just a workhorse for commercial satellites. It is a bridge between our present capabilities in Earth orbit and our future ambitions in the solar system. For Viasat, the successful launch of F3 is both an ending and a beginning. It is the end of a decade-long development journey that saw the Viasat-3 program survive delays, geopolitical disruptions, an insurance disaster with F1, and years of financial pressure. And it is the beginning of a new chapter, one in which Viasat can finally operate a complete global constellation, serve customers across every major region of the world, and start realizing the commercial returns that justify the enormous investment this program required. The Asia-Pacific region in particular is watching with genuine anticipation. Aviation customers across Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Southeast Asia who have been waiting for expanded Viasat capacity are ready to deploy enhanced in-flight connectivity solutions the moment F3 enters service. Maritime operators across some of the world's busiest shipping corridors have been sizing their network plans around the additional bandwidth this satellite will bring. And government and defense customers in the region, who rely on Viasat's secure, high-bandwidth satellite services for mission-critical communications, have been waiting for this final piece of the global network puzzle to fall into place. What this mission ultimately represents, at its deepest level, is a story about persistence. It is a story about a rocket that rewrote the rules of heavy lift launch in 2018 and is still rewriting them in 2026. It is a story about a satellite program that refused to die despite disasters and delays. It is a story about the relentless forward momentum of an industry that is connecting the world, literally, and pushing the human project of connecting this planet one step further toward completion. If you want to understand the future of how the world communicates, how planes fly connected, how ships navigate smarter, how remote communities access the same internet that powers cities, then watch missions like this one, because the future is not being written in boardrooms. It is being written in fire and thrust and orbital mechanics, 22,000 miles above your head, one satellite at a time.